Michelle and Breea Renee were just an ordinary mother and daughter living in a quiet town until one morning when they vanished without a trace, plunging their peaceful community into a nightmare of fear, mystery, and betrayal that would grip the nation. Cedar Grove was a small, peaceful town tucked away in the hills of Northern California. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where front doors were left unlocked and neighbors waved from across the street. The community was tight-knit, and major crimes were almost unheard of. Life moved slowly, and people liked it that way. That's why the events of September 3, 2017, left the town shaken to its core. Michelle Renee, a 36-year-old single mother, lived on Willow Lane with her daughter, Breea. Their small blue house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by trimmed hedges and flowering gardens. Michelle was known around town as kind, dependable, and hardworking. She had worked at River Valley Bank for nearly 10 years and was recently promoted to assistant branch manager. Breea, her only child, was 11 years old and in the 6th grade. She was cheerful, smart, and always seen riding her bicycle or carrying her backpack full of books. Everyone loved the Renees. That morning, Michelle was supposed to be at work by 8 a.m. When she didn't show up, her coworkers assumed she was just running late. By 10 a.m., they began calling her phone. When the calls went straight to voicemail and there was still no sign of her by lunch, worry started to spread. Michelle was never late. Her supervisor tried contacting relatives, but no one had heard from her. Meanwhile, Breea's school reported she hadn't arrived either. The alarm was growing louder. At around 2 p.m., a neighbor named Mrs. Donner noticed something strange. Michelle's car was still in the driveway, and the trash bins hadn't been brought in. The curtains were drawn, and the house was unusually quiet. She knocked on the door but got no answer. Concerned, she called the police and requested a welfare check. When officers arrived, they found the front door locked but the back door slightly ajar. Upon entering the house, they were met with a scene that immediately raised red flags. A picture frame was shattered on the floor near the hallway. A lamp in the living room had been knocked over. Most telling of all were the muddy boot prints leading from the hallway to the kitchen and out the back door. It was clear something had gone terribly wrong. A search of the house revealed that both Michelle and Breea were missing. Their phones, purses, and even Breea's school supplies were still inside. The television was still on in the living room, frozen on a paused kids' show. Whatever had happened, it had happened fast and without warning. Within hours, Cedar Grove transformed from a quiet town to the center of a growing investigation. The Renee home was cordoned off, crime scene tape stretched across the porch. Word spread quickly, and neighbors watched in disbelief. No one had seen or heard anything. Michelle and Breea had vanished without a trace. The investigation into the disappearance of Michelle and Breea Renee moved quickly. The small-town police force was overwhelmed, so the state authorities stepped in. Inside the Renee home, officers were careful not to disturb anything that could be used as evidence. Every room was photographed and searched thoroughly, and it didn't take long before they discovered something chilling on the kitchen counter. A single sheet of lined notebook paper sat beside the toaster. The message was written in large, uneven block letters. "Do not call the police. We are watching. Follow the instructions or you'll never see them again." It was a threat, clear and cold. The handwriting was shaky, likely written in a rush or by someone trying to disguise their normal style. The paper had no fingerprints. It had been handled carefully, probably with gloves. Despite the warning, it was already too late. The police had been called, and the investigation was in full swing. Forensic teams scoured the house and soon found more disturbing evidence. A piece of silver duct tape stuck to the hallway carpet suggested that someone had been bound. In the bedroom, one of Michelle's pillowcases was missing, along with a pair of her shoes. Investigators believe the kidnappers had used the items to silence and move the victims without leaving much evidence behind. Later that day, officers discovered something else that deepened the mystery. A muddy boot print was lifted from the hardwood floor, and lab analysis revealed a partial fingerprint on the doorknob leading to the backyard. This was a breakthrough. When run through the criminal database, the fingerprint matched a man named Lucas Darnell, a known felon with a history of robbery and assault. Lucas had disappeared from law enforcement radar over 3 years ago. Now, it appeared he was back and involved in something far more sinister. While authorities worked to track down Lucas, another piece of the puzzle surfaced. Michelle's employer, River Valley Bank, shared recent records with investigators. One file stood out, Michelle had been involved in overseeing a large vault transfer of cash just a week before the kidnapping. Over $2 million had been moved for a private client quietly, without public notice. The timing was too close to be a coincidence. It raised a serious question. Was this kidnapping really about Michelle and Breea, or was it part of a larger scheme involving money? The answer seemed to come 2 days later, when a package arrived at the Cedar Grove Police Department. Inside were several printed photographs showing Michelle and Breea. They were tied to chairs in what looked like a dimly lit basement, eyes wide with fear. Also included was a USB drive. On it, a short video clip showed Michelle speaking directly to the camera. She was visibly terrified. She begged the police to follow the kidnappers' instructions. Her message was clear. This was no ordinary kidnapping. It was the beginning of a carefully planned crime. The moment the video and photos arrived, the FBI was called in to take over the investigation. A special task force was quickly assembled, named Operation Goldwire. The mission was clear: find Michelle and Breea before the kidnappers' deadline and prevent the large sum of money from disappearing along with them. Investigators focused on the fingerprint found on the back door's doorknob. The partial print belonged to Lucas Darnell, a criminal who specialized in high-risk heists and had been linked to an attempted armored truck robbery 3 years prior. Lucas was known for his meticulous planning and dangerous skills, especially with explosives, which made him even more of a threat. But despite his past, Lucas had vanished without a trace after that failed robbery. Now, his return meant something serious was brewing. The FBI began digging into Lucas's recent activities. Surveillance footage from a gas station about 15 miles outside Cedar Grove showed a man resembling Lucas fueling a car and buying snacks late at night, the day before the kidnapping. The image was grainy, but the clothing and facial features matched what agents knew about him. This was the first solid lead. Following this, a tip led investigators to an abandoned farmhouse 20 miles away from town. The farmhouse was remote, surrounded by thick woods and overgrown fields. Inside, the FBI found evidence that someone had been living there recently. There were empty food wrappers, a torn piece of rope, and even duct tape identical to the kind found in the Renee house. It seemed like a hideout, but Michelle and Breea were nowhere to be found. The discovery suggested the kidnappers were moving their captives regularly, trying to stay one step ahead of the police. Further searches around the farmhouse revealed tire tracks leading into the woods, hinting that a vehicle had been used to transport Michelle and Breea. While the search for the girls continued, another layer of the crime unfolded. One of Michelle's co-workers was arrested and questioned after investigators uncovered suspicious bank transfers. Under pressure, he confessed to helping the kidnappers by providing inside information about the bank's vault security. What shocked everyone was his motive. Michelle had caught him embezzling money weeks before the kidnapping. She planned to report him, and he joined forces with the kidnappers in a desperate attempt to silence her and escape with millions. This revelation explained why the kidnappers were so focused on the vault money. It was no longer just a simple ransom. The crime was connected to greed, betrayal, and desperation. The kidnappers had planned to use Michelle to gain access to the vault, but their greed had led to a dangerous chain of events, putting 2 innocent lives at risk. As Operation Goldwire intensified, the FBI knew they were running out of time. The kidnappers were experienced and dangerous, and Michelle and Breea's lives hung by a thread. The chase was on, but where were the girls now? The answer lay in the shadows beneath the city itself. The tip about sounds coming from the old subway tunnels beneath the city came from a homeless man who often wandered near the sealed-off entrances. He told the FBI he had heard muffled screams late at night, but was too afraid to investigate. The tunnels had been closed for years after a deadly accident during construction, and no one had officially entered since. Despite the danger, the authorities decided to search the underground network, hoping to find some clue about Michelle and Breea's whereabouts. The tunnels were dark, damp, and labyrinthine, stretching for miles under the city streets. FBI agents, equipped with flashlights and tactical gear, moved cautiously, calling out but receiving no response. After hours of searching, they discovered a small camp set up in a forgotten corner. Blankets, empty food cans, and flickering candles. The area looked like someone had been staying there recently. Nearby, they found 2 chairs with torn ropes lying beside them, and a small, colorful bracelet that investigators quickly identified as Breea's. But the relief was short-lived. As the team explored further, they realized something wasn't right. The background of the video Michelle had recorded, the one sent to the police, did not match the surroundings of the tunnels. The furniture and lighting seen in the video resembled those of the abandoned farmhouse discovered earlier, not the underground shelter they had just found. This raised a troubling possibility. The kidnappers were deliberately creating false trails to confuse the search efforts. They had moved Michelle and Breea from the farmhouse to another location and used the video to mislead the police. As the investigation unfolded, the unexpected happened. A bank employee came forward with a confession that shocked the entire team. He admitted to having inside knowledge of the kidnappers' plans and revealed his role in the crime. He had been embezzling money from the bank and feared Michelle would expose him. When he realized the kidnappers intended to use her to access the vault, he decided to help them in exchange for a cut of the stolen cash. His confession shed light on the complexity of the kidnapping and its connection to the bank heist. It wasn't just a random crime but a carefully orchestrated plan fueled by greed and betrayal from within. The FBI intensified their search, now focusing on locations connected to the bank employee and Lucas Darnell. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became that Michelle and Breea were being moved, often hidden in places meant to keep them out of sight. The investigation was reaching a critical point. The kidnappers' strategy of using false clues had slowed the search, but the authorities were closing in. The tunnels, the farmhouse, and the bank employee's confession had all provided pieces of the puzzle. But the final location of Michelle and Breea remained a mystery. The next breakthrough would come from an unexpected source and it would change everything about the case. 5 days after Michelle and Breea disappeared, a sudden break in the case stunned everyone involved. The Cedar Grove Police Department received a call from a payphone located along a deserted highway nearly 80 miles away from town. The voice on the other end was faint but clear. Michelle and Breea had been found, alive and unharmed, walking beside the road. Officers rushed to the location and found them just as described. Michelle was bruised and exhausted, her clothes torn, but she was holding Breea's hand tightly. Breea, though shaken, appeared physically unharmed. The two were confused but grateful to be free. Michelle later revealed they had been held captive in a storage container hidden behind an abandoned lumber yard on the outskirts of a neighboring county. According to Michelle, the kidnappers kept them in the cramped, dark container for days with little food and water. The captors came and went, but during a shift change, one of the guards failed to lock the container door properly. That small mistake gave Michelle and Breea their chance to escape. Despite her weakened condition, Michelle managed to help Breea out of the container and together they ran through the nearby woods, eventually reaching the highway where they were found. The news sent shockwaves through Cedar Grove. The community that had been holding its breath finally exhaled in relief. The lumber yard was quickly raided by the FBI and local police. Inside, they found evidence linking the kidnappers to the site: discarded rope, duct tape, and a partially burned notebook containing coded messages. 2 men were arrested at the scene, one of whom was identified as a known associate of Lucas Darnell. Lucas himself was captured just days later, hiding in a motel in a neighboring state under a false identity. The FBI credited thorough surveillance and coordination with law enforcement agencies across state lines for his arrest. He was found with several false IDs, a small arsenal of weapons, and documents related to the bank heist and the kidnapping. Meanwhile, the bank employee who had confessed earlier was cooperating fully with authorities, helping to unravel the financial trail and reveal the full scope of the embezzlement scheme. The stolen $2.3 million was recovered in hidden accounts and safe deposit boxes. Michelle and Breea began the slow process of recovery, supported by family, friends, and the town that never stopped hoping for their safe return. Therapy and counseling helped them heal from the trauma, and the community rallied to rebuild the trust that had been shaken. Though the kidnapping was over, its impact lingered. Cedar Grove's quiet streets now held the memory of fear, resilience, and a mother's unbreakable determination. The case became a lasting reminder that even in the most peaceful places, danger can lurk in the shadows, but courage and hope can shine brighter. The kidnapping of Michelle and Breea Renee would never be forgotten. It was a story of terror, betrayal, and survival, one that left a mark on everyone who lived through it.